Hey, this is Dr. Steve Ranicki with Dr. Ranicki's Creating Wellness Center in Savannah, Georgia. So probably the most common question people ask about chiropractic care is, will my insurance cover it? And the truth is this question and answer obviously keeps changing because every year what the insurance companies do and don't cover and how much they cover changes just a little bit. But there was a major change in this around the time of the Affordable Care Act that went into play in 2014. Things changed pretty dramatically there because at that point, one thing that you saw for sure was that people's deductibles went much higher and their copays went much higher. And there's another very big difference that happened at that point. Prior to the Affordable Care Act, what we would see was that most health insurance programs did cover chiropractic care, a certain amount of it anyways, usually not nearly as much as the patient needed, but they did cover a certain amount of it. And they typically had a deductible that was relatively low and a copay that was relatively low. But since the Affordable Care Act, now what happens is that the insurance companies will still tell you that they'll cover 20 visits, 24 visits, 30 visits, or something like that. But those 20 visits are all just going to wind up getting applied to the deductible if you've not already met it. If you've already met your deductible, then yes, they'll actually cover for those and they'll reimburse you for those. But since most people these days have deductibles high enough that they're not getting met, finding a chiropractor that takes your insurance becomes a moot point. Because if a chiropractor that does take your insurance, all it's going to do is just wind up getting applied to your deductible. And then you probably wouldn't even have gone and gotten very far in the process of meeting your deductible before you had already gone through those 20 visits that the insurance company allows you to have in any given year. And allows is a ridiculous statement, to be honest with you, because you can have as much care as you want. They're not going to pay for it anyways. So why would they tell you what they allow? What that really means is that if you'd already met your deductible, this is how many they would pay for. But since you're not yet haven't met your deductible, we're going to take those 20 visits and we're going to burn them up in the process of applying them to your deductible. So since you're not going to get any insurance benefit most likely anyways, you might as well see the chiropractor that is going to be able to do the best job for you. And one little secret that most people don't know about the health insurance world is that you're going to get a better quality of care with an out-of-network doctor typically. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's any more expensive. It means that your insurance is not going to pay them directly, but that you would pay the doctor and the insurance would pay you back. But again, if the insurance is not paying anyways, this really doesn't change anything for you. Your out-of-pocket cost stays the same. So an in-network doctor, typically, they're not going to spend, an out-of-network doctor is typically not going to spend any money on billing insurance, fighting denied claims, writing more reports to prove to the insurance company that you really, really need the care, and those kinds of things. So they keep their prices at about the same, if not lower than the in-network doctors, but be able to provide a higher quality of care because now all of that time they're not spending on fighting the insurance companies and writing reports and so on, they can put into reading more research, attending more continuing education seminars and those kinds of things. Things that are going to be focused on getting you a better result and a better response. Another factor of it was just this past weekend, I was in a seminar and there were other chiropractors there that were talking about their insurance woes and the letters they're getting from the insurance companies saying that your colleagues are seeing patients much, much less than you are, so we think you need to stop seeing patients as much. Now, these weren't chiropractors seeing patients an incredible amount. They were chiropractors seeing patients a little less than I think is still the average and what the average patient needs. But this particular insurance company had a policy in place that they wanted a doctor to see the patient only 6 times in a year. Even though the insurance company said they were covered 20 visits per calendar year, what they were telling the in-network doctors and kind of a veiled threat was, if you see the patient any more than 6 times, we're going to kick you out of the network. We're going to label you an overutilizer and give you the boot. So the doctors who were in the network and are particularly concerned about staying in the network, they now wind up recommending, well, I shouldn't say they will, they may wind up recommending less care for the patient than what the patient really needs to avoid that overutilizer label and not get kicked out of the network. But when you see an out-of-network doctor, you don't have to worry about that dynamic. The doctor gets to make the decisions based on exactly what you really need and not what some insurance adjuster is telling them that you should or shouldn't get. Somebody who, by the way, has never met you, hasn't seen you, hasn't looked over the results of your exam or your x-rays or any of those kinds of things. They're just basing it on statistics. So most people think the most logical question to ask when they first call a chiropractor's office is, do you take my insurance? And I would suggest to you that's probably the least valuable questions to ask these days, unless you have a zero deductible. If you happen to be one of those few people that have the most amazing insurance and no deductibles and very low copays, unless you're one of those, you're just not going to find the insurance question to be all that beneficial or helpful. But instead, I'd be looking at things such as, how long has the doctor been in practice? What's their favorite type of case to take care of? What's the last continuing education seminar they took? Things like that. I would encourage you to go in to request to set up an interview with the doctor, meaning that if you go in, you're not really going to do anything clinical. It's not a consultation. You're going to get a tour of the office, kind of get a feel for the energy and the vibe. Notice if it looks like there's wallpaper peeling off the walls, has been there since 1942, and nothing in the office looks like it's been replaced since 1976, or if it all looks very modern and current and up to date, because that's a pretty good judge of if the doctor's putting a lot of time and money into updating their skill sets and their abilities as well, or are they still operating on the same things they learned a long, long time ago when they were in school. So take a tour of the office, meet the doctor, do a casual interview. You can think of some questions about how much success they've had with other patients with similar types of problems and things like that if you want. And then once you've got to feel like you've interviewed 4 or 5 or however many you care to and decided that this chiropractor is the best one for you, then go in, do a consultation, the exam, x-rays if they would like those, whatever it is that particular doctor wants to do for that initial new patient exam. And then of course, I'd also do your research on Google. Look at Google reviews and look for things like, what do the patients have to say? And how passionate do the patients seem to be about that? Like if a chiropractor has 200 reviews, but all of them say they're such a great doctor or they really love the staff, that's just not as impressive to me as if they've got 50 reviews, but every one of those 50, the people have written paragraphs and paragraphs about the amazing, impressive things that this doctor has done for them and how their life has changed. So that's the kind of research I would do when picking a chiropractor. So more videos will be coming. Keep tuned. Again, Dr. Ranicki with Dr. Ranicki's Creating Wellness Center in Savannah, Georgia. Let us know if we can help.